Welcome to the Nature Commission State of Nature 2024 talk series. This series of talks is one of the ways we are sharing the information contained in State of Nature 2024. This presentation is about birds, and we will also cover the pressures on these species and what we can all do to help reduce these pressures and protect our natural environment. There are 333 birds listed on the Guernsey birds list, which is correct to the end of 2022, and you can see a snapshot here taken from this list. The birds of Guernsey and Herm are one of the most well-studied species groups. They are very popular among wildlife enthusiasts, and as such there is a wealth of data available. There are several long-running surveys, such as the Wade account, run by the British Trust for Ornithology, which was established in the 1970s. Data from this survey has shown that many of our waded species are undergoing long-term declines. Guernsey and Herm are valuable for breeding seabirds, as these areas support nationally and internationally important populations. Islands are also on a migratory route between the UK and Europe, meaning rare bird species and those you would not expect to see sometimes make an appearance. 22 birds have been added to the States of Guernsey's priority species list, comprising of seabirds, waders, thrushes and finches. All breeding bird species and their nests are protected by Section 7 of the Animal Welfare Ordinance. This ordinance protects against destruction, damage and disturbance of nests and eggs, as well as disturbance of birds that are rearing young and their dependent young. Terrestrial birds are monitored by the Breeding Bird Survey and the Garden Bird Watch. The Breeding Bird Survey involves undertaking 3 site visits to an allocated 1 kilometre square, count all the birds seen and heard, as well as recording any nest counts or nesting behaviour. 20 of these allocated squares have at least 1 year's worth of recorded data in Guernsey, and you can see the distribution of these squares on this map here. These squares cover 26.9% of Guernsey's area, and the survey covers 54 regularly breeding species, 13 scarce breeders, and 40 non-breeders or former breeders. Former breeders include the turtle dove and the lesser whitethroat. And research also suggests we've lost a further 15 breeding species from the islands. Trends were created for 22 of the most common bird species in Guernsey using data from 2008 to 2018. For example, the starling has seen a minus 76% decline over 10 years, whereas the blackcap has seen a 116% increase over 10 years. But these trends are based off a very small sample size, so caution should always be taken when referring to them. Indicators were also created for farmland, woodland and urban birds, and in line with the UK, our farmland birds are decreasing. Encouragement of consistent and sustained coverage of the breeding bird survey squares across Guernsey would allow for more trends to be calculated for other species. Ideally, all 20 previously surveyed squares would be covered every year. 1/3 of Guernsey's terrestrial area is made up of gardens. Garden Birdwatch encourages people to submit a weekly list of the species seen in their gardens all year round. 16 gardens were monitored in various years between 1995 to 2021, during which 82 bird species have been recorded. Starlings were the most abundant, followed by the house sparrow. However, the current sample size is too small to produce any meaningful analysis, and a larger sample size taken over the long term would enable more useful analysis to be undertaken. Encouraging more volunteers to take part in Garden Birdwatch would complement the data from the Breeding Bird Survey and allow for additional species to be monitored. This project is free to sign up to, and all you need to do is to keep a list of the different birds using your garden over the course of a week, which you can confidently identify. These sightings then need to be submitted at the end of the week to the website. Many of our bird species are effectively monitored by at least one survey. However, half of our 72 breeding species, such as the stonechat, are not monitored sufficiently to produce any trend or productivity data. It's possible that targeted surveys may help to obtain data on these 36 species. Bird ringing is another method of collecting information about birds. Licensed bird ringers will use mist nets to safely catch birds. These will then be ringed with a unique metal ring. Birds will be aged and sexed where possible, and each species has its own set of criteria for this. Measurements of the wing are also taken, and the bird is then weighed before release. It's then hoped that these birds will be caught elsewhere, and this will provide information on their age, how far they can travel, and where they end up. The Channel Islands has its own bird ringing scheme, as neither the UK or France would allow us to join their schemes. And the Channel Islands was one of the first schemes to start taking wing measurements. Conducting constant effort site ringing studies may also provide further information. Constant effort sites form part of the first national standardised ringing programme within the BTO bird ringing scheme. Ringers operate the same nets in the same locations at regular intervals throughout the breeding season. This provides valuable trend information on the abundance of adults and juveniles, productivity, and also adult survival rates for 24 species of common songbird. The Guernsey Barn Owl Survey is an example of a targeted survey which is run by the ornithology section of La Société, and it was set up to monitor breeding success and numbers. Barn owls were found to breed in every parish in Guernsey, though they tended to favour more rural parishes. There are around 19 breeding sites and another 8 roosting sites. This is in comparison to 13 known breeding sites and 8 roosting sites in the late 1990s. To obtain a population count, the fledged chick count needs to be balanced against a high mortality rate among first-year birds over the winter. It's known that a high proportion will not survive the winter, which will affect any population estimates. A count could not be obtained from all survey sites, and there may be some breeding sites that are currently not known, so it's likely that the estimated minimum population is about 100 birds. Breeding adults make up 50% of the numbers in 2022, as seen on the graph, with fledged owlets making up 37% and non-breeders 13%. Guernsey and Herm support 1% of the national European shag population. Nationally, more than 1% of the Great Britain, Isle of Man and Channel Island populations of storm petrel, gannet, shag, greater and lesser blackback and herring gulls. And internationally, more than 1% of the biogeographic population of the gannet, shag, and lesser blackback gull. Various seabird surveys have been conducted in bailiwick waters. Guernsey and Herm participate in a seabird monitoring programme periodically to record the populations of our breeding seabirds. There is data from 1970, 1986 to 1992, 2000, 2015, 2020, 2021, and 2023. Overall, general trends show seabirds are declining. In particular, shags and herring gulls have suffered declines, and this is shown in the most recent survey from last year. Guernsey has nationally important populations of these species. Our islets, such as Lihu, are excellent nesting grounds for our seabirds, and it's vital that disturbance is kept to a minimum to help boost breeding success. Better protection of vital nesting habitats and feeding areas may help to boost numbers. Continued monitoring is also necessary. Seabirds are top predators of marine ecosystems, and they're good indicators of the health of the marine environment. The Balearic shearwater first started appearing in bailiwick waters in large numbers in 2004. It's critically endangered globally, with a relatively small population of 19,000 individuals. At least 15% of the global population molt in bailiwick waters, making them one of our most important migrant seabirds. The Balearic shearwater population is undergoing a rapid decline due to low adult and juvenile survival rates. The main threats are bycatch at sea and predation at breeding colonies by introduced mammals. Also, new developments in the vicinity of breeding colonies and increased human disturbance both have a significant impact. Population models predict an over 90% decline in 3 generations, with an average extinction time of around 60 years. Monitoring is needed, and as part of the French National Action Plan, Guernsey and partners in France and Jersey have been conducting boat surveys of our waters to establish the numbers present throughout the summer months. Wading birds in Guernsey are declining. In 2020, findings showed a 90% decline in the annual observed turnstone and dunlin numbers on our beaches in the last 40 years. Records from the last 20 years show a 99% decline in purple sandpipers. Many waders sight faithful and they struggle to adapt to increased disturbance. Climate change is also a key driver of declines, as due to milder winters in other parts of the world, wading birds no longer need to migrate to Guernsey and Herm. Declines are also representative of broader declines taking place across the whole of the UK. The BTO wader count is one of Guernsey's longest running surveys, being conducted since the 70s and covering a large proportion of beaches in Guernsey. We can see here on this map that areas that are in grey have already been taken, and they are having monthly counts conducted on them to record wading birds in the area. Historically, these wader counts also covered Herm and several inland wetland areas in Guernsey. These are no longer undertaken. Conducting these wader counts in Herm again would help to get a broader picture of the state of waders in both islands. 19 wading species have been recorded annually in sufficient numbers to support further detailed analysis. Of these, 7 species have seen long-term declines, such as the lapwing and the grey plover. When we say long-term, we're talking 25 years, and lapwings have decreased by 78% in the long term, and grey plover 85%. Further 11 species have suffered declines in the medium term, so 10 years. Declines are likely due to increased human disturbance, although further investigation is needed to determine additional causes of decline. While knowing what species and habitats are present on island is crucial for conservation, it's also important to know the causes and rate of change to the natural environment. We are then able to manage and mitigate the negative impacts. These changes can occur naturally, but are usually due to human activities. State in Nature 2024 identifies the primary threats or pressures to our habitats and species, and also notes the cumulative effect of these multiple pressures and the subsequent impact on our natural environment. By increasing our understanding of the pressures facing our natural environment, as well as improving understanding about species and habitats, we can introduce targeted conservation measures to try and address the imbalance brought about by negative human impacts. Threats to our birds include physical and visual disturbance, disease, habitat loss and degradation, and climate change. We're now going to look at some of these threats in more detail. Climate change is one of the most significant threats to biodiversity globally. The evidence suggests it's having an impact now, however the impacts are likely to increase significantly over time, increasing the level of threat that our wildlife will face in the future. Some species will be able to adapt, while others will not, and are likely to decline without human intervention. Seasonal changes caused by climate change are impacting birds. Blue tits have evolved to time their breeding cycle to match peak caterpillar abundance. However, warming temperatures causes chicks to hatch earlier. If blue tits and other species are unable to adapt their breeding cycle to this change, they will miss peak availability, resulting in less food for chicks and reduced breeding success. Seasonal changes also impact migratory birds, whose passage is synchronized to match peak food availability. Mismatches in season shifts can impact survival rates. Pace of change is also an important factor in species' ability to adapt. Habitat is being lost due to development. Being an island means that a lack of land availability creates a tension between development and providing space for nature. There's a potential for further declines in valuable habitat if development on the green spaces and in the coastal zone in Guernsey continues without thorough consideration of the biodiversity impacts. Many new buildings are lacking in external features used by breeding birds such as swifts and house martins, so there's less habitat available for nesting sites. Development also causes habitat fragmentation, preventing species travelling between feeding and nesting sites, and also habitat loss through the replacement of hedges with fencing, which will further reduce foraging and nesting sites. Coastal development leads to disturbance which affects our waders and seabirds. It may directly cause damage to habitats and indirectly may also cause a loss of valuable habitats due to coastal squeeze. Coastal squeeze is where structures such as sea walls prevent the natural movement of habitats inland, causing the loss or degradation of the habitats used by our coastal bird species. Intensive management also causes habitat loss and degradation. It's widely acknowledged in the UK that the post-war demand for self-sufficient food production has reduced the amount of biodiverse natural habitats. This is due to the intensification of farming methods and the loss of ecologically important farmland habitat, such as hedgerows and permanent grassland, to grass or arable monocultures. The same has happened in Guernsey, although on a smaller scale, causing large amounts of land to become less suitable for wildlife. Intensive land management, as well as lack of management for biodiversity outcomes, has driven habitat change and species decline. Traditionally, arable land in Guernsey supported a wide diversity of annual flowers, which need disturbed land to thrive. However, this has now been replaced by agriculturally improved monocultures. Many birds rely on seeds produced by cover crops and wildflowers, or permanent grasslands, which are cut late for hay for nesting, and these habitats are no longer present in many farming systems. Several species of farmland birds are now extinct as breeders in Guernsey, such as the yellowhammer and the corn bunting. Other species, such as linnet and skylarks, have declined considerably. The conversion of agricultural land to domestic curtilage has further amplified the need for intensive land management. Gardens on former agricultural land extended to domestic curtilage increased in total area in Guernsey by 39% from 2010 to 2018. These areas are heavily managed, closely mown lawns or have been reseeded and often have little biodiversity present. Individuals, businesses and government can all play a part, whether it's big or small, in doing their bit to help local wildlife. In this section, we will look at some of the actions you can take to reduce your impact on the natural environment and help us enhance native biodiversity in Guernsey and Herm. There are many great organisations who are already supporting the natural environment in the work that they do, from biological data collection to nature education events. Corporate support is also a valuable way to help these local charities in their work. Here we have some actions up on the screen that you can take to help protect our natural environment. So islanders can contribute to addressing gaps in our knowledge and help to protect our natural environment by recording sightings of local wildlife. Apps such as iRecord or iNaturalist allow you to submit sightings in the field. These apps link in with the Guernsey Biological Record Centre, allowing all the data to be accessed from one central location. Submission of sightings can include native or invasive non-native species, and at a minimum needs only include the location, the date, and the number seen. This is important to help understand abundance and distribution of species across Guernsey and Herm. Attaching photos will also help for the data to be verified by local experts. Citizen science is a really great way to engage the public and also collect large amounts of useful data. It's really important to have data as you can't manage what you don't measure. As mentioned throughout this presentation, there are many citizen science projects you can get involved with to help monitor birds. These projects contribute to national schemes, so by collecting data, you'll be helping to build a picture of the British Isles as a whole, as well as Guernsey and Herm. More information can be found on our website about these projects. You can also find Garden Birdwatch, Breeding Bird Survey and Wade account on the BTO's website. Domestic gardens and parks have considerable potential as habitat for wildlife if they are managed sympathetically. These spaces make up around 1/3 of Guernsey's terrestrial area. In State and Nature 2024 is a list of actions that can be taken to help garden for wildlife. These include following the guidance available on the sustainable cutting of roadside hedges, trimming inside hedges much more infrequently, planting native trees and hedge plants, leaving fallen fruit for birds to feed on, and putting up bird feeders and nest boxes. The full State and Nature 2024 report is available on our website via this QR code, and the State and Nature 2024 summary report can also be accessed here. Please do give us a follow on social media if you don't already. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn, and you can check out our website. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us office@naturecommission.gg. Thank you very much for listening.